In our headlines on this Thursday afternoon, April 18th, here in South Korea. Top finance officials representing the Yoon, Kishida and Biden administrations agreed to consult closely on foreign exchange markets during their first trilateral dialogue on Wednesday in Washington. Meanwhile, Korea's debt-to-GDP ratio is forecast to reach almost 60% by the year 2029, according to the International Monetary Fund, which adds this election year may see global debt levels rising. And Seoul is playing host to Korea's annual World IT Show, with domestic business heavyweights showcasing daily devices that have effectively incorporated artificial intelligence. Asian currencies, including those of the Korean won and the Japanese yen, have been losing substantial ground against the US dollar. Accordingly, finance authorities from the three countries have agreed to work together to address related concerns. Our Shin Se-byuk reports.
The finance ministers of South Korea, the United States, and Japan have acknowledged serious concerns regarding the rapid decline in the value of the South Korean won and the Japanese yen against the dollar. Following their first trilateral meeting in Washington on Wednesday, South Korea's Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, and Japan's Finance Minister Shinichi Suzuki issued a joint statement outlining their commitment to regular consultations on foreign exchange market trends and continued collaboration to promote sustainable economic growth and financial stability. The major concern raised by the three countries focused on the persistent devaluation of the won and yen against the US dollar. The won is currently ranked as the fifth most undervalued currency among OECD countries. According to data released by the Bank for International Settlements on Wednesday, as of February 18th, South Korea's real effective exchange rate stood at 96.7 out of 100, using 2020 as the base year. The REER measures the relative purchasing power of a country's currency compared to other nations. A value above 100 indicates an overvaluation relative to the base year, while below 100 signifies undervaluation. Japan has the lowest index value among the OECD nations at 70.3. This assessment indicates that the strength of the US dollar, coupled with the significant undervaluation of the Japanese currency, directly affects the won. Meanwhile, Bank of Korea Governor Lee Chang-yong acknowledged slight deviation in the won's exchange rate from market fundamentals, but reaffirmed that the authorities are equipped with the necessary tools to stabilize any volatile moves in the national currency. His comments indicating Korea's readiness to intervene in the market to support the won were made during an International Monetary Fund panel session on Wednesday. He is in the U.S. capital for the annual IMF and World Bank meetings, as well as meetings with G20 finance leaders and leading central bankers. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
And there has been a rather worrying outlook about Korea's future debt-to-GDP ratio. The International Monetary Fund says this ratio may hit close to 60% by the year 2029. Our Lee Seung-jae covers the outlook for Korea and its neighbors.
The South Korean government's debt-to-gross domestic product ratio already exceeded 50% for the first time in 2021 and is expected to reach close to 60% by 2029. That's according to the International Monetary Fund's Fiscal Monitor report released on Wednesday, which included the debt-to-GDP ratio from 2015 to 2029 in 37 advanced countries, including South Korea, the United States, and Japan. The report says South Korea's debt-to-GDP ratio hit 55.2% in 2023, a 1.4 percentage point increase from the year before. IMF data also shows that the country's debt-to-GDP stood at 40.8% in 2015, but surged from 42.1% in 2019 to 48.7% in 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic. It reached 51.3% in 2021, exceeding the 50% mark for the first time. The UN agency also estimated that South Korea's debt will reach 56.6% this year and will continue to increase, hitting 59.4% in 2029. The IMF also said that global debt levels are at risk of increasing due to 2024 being an election year. Vitor Gaspar, the head of the International Monetary Fund's fiscal affairs, said that history and empirical evidence show that governments tend to spend more or tax less in an election year. 88 economies or economic areas representing more than half of the world's population have either held or are due to hold elections this year. The IMF forecasts the U.S. fiscal deficit to remain above 6% over the next 5 years, with Gaspar noting the U.S. has ample fiscal space due to measures they can impose on the spending and revenue side. However, like the U.S., Gaspar says China's fiscal deficit is projected to rise from more than 7% of GDP last year to around 8% by 2029. This could have consequences for the global economy as China is a major lender to developing countries. The Fiscal Monitor report called for countries to make a renewed push towards improving their fiscal positions, especially due to the tight monetary policies in many central banks, which are expected to be loosened later this year. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
In other news now, global oil prices appear to be easing. June futures for Brent crude, the global benchmark, retreated over 3% to $87 29 cents a barrel on Wednesday. Now, this is reportedly the first time in 4 trading days that the price has dropped below $90 as the market responds to global calls for restraint in the Middle East. U.S. crude oil futures for May also eased, closing at $82.69 per barrel, the lowest since March 27th. Meanwhile, the U.S. is continuously improving its mainland defense system to counter threats from North Korea. Now, this is according to John Plum, U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense for Space Policy, who added that Washington's ground-based mid-course defense is designed to protect the homeland, including Guam, from North Korean missiles. The Pentagon is also actively investing in its new homeland missile defense capability called the Next Generation Interceptor. Washington also remains committed to maintaining a mechanism to monitor UN sanctions on Pyongyang despite Moscow's recent veto of such efforts. Our correspondent Kim Jong-sil reports.
The career diplomat with over 40 years of experience, the top U.S. envoy to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, met with reporters in Seoul on the last day of her visit. This was the veteran diplomat's first visit to South Korea, but her 4-day trip, which started on Sunday, was packed with appointments including meeting with the president and visiting the demilitarized zone.
The DMZ is one of those places where the past and the present collide, where the lines, literal and metaphorically, that divided the peninsula 70 years ago not only remained, but unfortunately, I feel more deeply entrenched than ever before. And as I said at the DMZ, that re-entrenchment is owed to the DPRK's lawlessness both within the country and far beyond it.
The U.S. ambassador also said discussions are taking place to continue the work done by the UN panel of experts set to expire at the end of this month.
That includes charting a path forward following Russia's concerning veto and China's abstention of a UN Security Council resolution that would have renewed the mandate of the 1718 Committee panel of experts.
The panel has been monitoring, investigating, and reporting on sanctions violations by North Korea for the past 14 years.
We discussed options both inside and outside the UN system, in lockstep with our ROK and Japanese partners, because it's critical that all member states continue receiving independent and accurate reporting of the DPRK's ongoing weapons proliferation and sanction evasion activities.
When asked about the potential risk of Russia and China opposing such efforts, the U.S. envoy said this.
I think we will eventually find a mechanism to continue to do that reporting. And yes, Russia and China will continue to try to block those efforts, but that is not going to stop us from finding that path moving forward.
The ambassador stressed that the goal of her visit was to enhance trilateral cooperation between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan on the Security Council and beyond. She has left for Japan, where she'll stay until Saturday. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
An earthquake measuring 6.6 on the Richter scale hit southern Japan off the west coast of Shikoku Island Wednesday night. According to Japanese media outlets, at least 7 people have been injured, and minor damage has been reported as of this Thursday. Also, no irregularities have been detected at the Ikata nuclear power plant in western Shikoku. Korea's World IT Show kicked off its 2024 edition earlier this week with business heavyweights effectively embracing AI in everyday devices. Our Moon Hye-ryun tells us how.
The 16th edition of the World IT Show opened on Tuesday in Seoul with 446 companies from 10 countries in attendance. The central theme at this year's World IT Show is innovation in everyday life created by AI, so let's take a look and see what AI innovations are on display. A range of hardware and software products incorporating AI technology was set up at the booths run by domestic and foreign firms, such as the Galaxy AI integrated in the latest line of smartphones from tech giant Samsung Electronics. The AI functions available on the Galaxy S24 smartphones are largely attributed as the reason behind the firm's return to its leading position in global smartphone sales in the first quarter of the year. While it offers a number of perks that can be used in everyday life, such as a search tool that can be used on images or videos, and a photo editing tool that has a range of functions to help users polish their photos, a feature that's stolen the spotlight is the live interpretation function.
For example, you could use this function to make a reservation at a restaurant overseas through a phone call. It's available as an on-device feature, so you don't need the internet to use it, which makes this very convenient.
And it's not just smartphones that have integrated AI technology to transform your day-to-day experience. LG Electronics have built-in artificial intelligence in household appliances, such as a television that senses the amount of light and sound in its surroundings to adjust its screen brightness and volume accordingly. Washing machines, too, are now smarter.
Our Trom washing machine senses how wet or how dirty an item of clothing is once it's put inside the machine, and adjusts the wash settings accordingly without the user having to do it themselves to make the process easier.
Other companies, such as telecommunications firm SK Telecom, displayed a security camera that identifies people or things and their actions through AI technology, while South Korea's internet company Kakao showcased AI functions integrated into their chatting application KakaoTalk that summarizes texts and edits the tone of messages to fit the situation. With AI becoming more and more advanced, firms are increasingly finding different ways to shape them to fit human needs. Moon Hye-ryun, Arirang News.
On the cultural front, Italy is poised to host the Venice Biennale starting this weekend until late November, marking its 60th edition this year under the theme of Foreigners Everywhere. The event seeks to shed light on the experiences of marginalized groups who have been excluded from the predominantly white Western art arena. A total of 4 Korean artists are partaking in the festival this year, the most since 2003. Up next, we share with you news of more flower festivals to mark the season of spring. Taean's Tulip Festival is in full bloom, and our Ian was there to take a look.
The 2024 Taean Tulip Festival is another reminder that spring is here. Hosted by the Korea Flower Park every year in Taean, Chungcheongnam-do Province, this is the festival's 13th edition.
This year's Taean Tulip Festival runs until May 7th. With 2.6 million colorful tulips, it promises visitors stunning views.
The Taean Tulip Festival was awarded the World Tulip Award twice, in 2015 and again in 2017, by the World Tulip Summit Society, recognizing it as one of the top 5 tulip festivals in the world. It is the only tulip festival in South Korea recognized by the international organization representing major tulip festivals and industries across the globe.
The design concept for this year is peacock, emphasizing the three-dimensional aspect of a peacock's tail feathers. We made the use of the different varieties, colors and sizes of tulips to maximize the visual impact.
Standing on the observatory, visitors can see the tulips planted in the shape of a peacock. One notable feature of the Taean Tulip Festival is the strategic planting of both early blooming and late blooming tulip varieties. Visitors can enjoy the full spectrum of tulips blossom, including the delightful transition of colors. Depending on when you visit during the 4-week-long festival, the peacock's tail could be white, red, or even multicolored.
It's actually absolutely beautiful display, and how they've poised the flowers for taller ones to be more prominent and the smaller ones to do in-depth, almost like a 3D effect of the imagery is really beautiful.
People are finding joy in the sculptures adorned with flowers and the colorful tulips spread across the festival grounds.
Despite the cloudy weather, being here with my mom among the blooming flowers with this wonderful scent, it feels good.
However, all visitors are gently reminded to be careful to ensure that everyone can fully enjoy the beautiful scenery.
There seems to be a trend among the younger generations of taking photos in a particular style, which sometimes can harm the flowers. Since many people are expected to visit, it would be appreciated if we could refrain from entering the flower beds and avoid placing our phones directly on the flowers.
So if you want a blooming good time this spring, the Taean Tulip Festival welcomes you with open arms. 이은희, Arirang News, Taean.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. In the US, President Joe Biden on Wednesday called for tariffs on Chinese steel and aluminium to be tripled during a campaign speech to United Steelworkers labor union members in Pittsburgh. Biden called on his US trade representative, Catherine Tai, to consider tripling the existing 7.5 average tariff rate on Chinese steel and aluminium under Section 301 of the Trade Expansion Act to 25%. The Biden administration has said that China is hindering the American economy by overproducing goods with the government's help and exporting cheaper products to the US. Biden further criticized China, saying that they're not competing, they're cheating, which is causing damage in the US. Biden also publicly opposed a nearly $15 billion deal for Japan's Nippon Steel to purchase US steel last month, which was overwhelmingly approved by the US Steel shareholders last week. Foreign ministers from the group of 7 countries gathered on the Italian island of Capri on Wednesday to commence 3 days of talks, which are expected to be overshadowed by discussions on new sanctions against Iran and aid to Ukraine. The meeting was initially scheduled to focus on the bloc's competitiveness amid heightened China-US competition, but the recent tensions in the Middle East called for attention. The US, ahead of Secretary of State Antony Blinken's arrival in Capri, said that it is planning to impose new sanctions on Iran's missile and drone program. Italy's Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani said on Wednesday that Italy supports the targeted sanctions against Tehran, especially on the makers of drones used in Iran's attack on Israel. Canadian and US authorities arrested 6 people on Wednesday and are looking for 3 more in connection to what has been called the largest gold heist in Canada's history. Over $16 million in gold bars, along with foreign currency, were stolen from Toronto's Pearson International Airport on April 17th last year in what the police described as an inside job. The suspects forged an airway bill to steal 6,600 gold bars, weighing 400 kilograms, and around $2 million in foreign-denominated bills, some of which was used to finance the purchase of dozens of firearms. Peel Regional Police released the names of 9 suspects who have all been charged with over 19 counts of theft and related crimes. 2 men who work for Air Canada's cargo division were allegedly key players in the heist, one of whom has been fired after being charged with theft, and the other reportedly having left the airline before the charges were made public. Moving over to New York City, where a group of ballerinas gathered at the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan to break the Guinness World Record for most dancers on point at the same time for 1 minute. 353 ballerinas from the US and abroad joined the event organized by the Youth America Grand Prix, the world's largest dance network and ballet scholarship competition. The previous world record was set with 306 ballerinas on point in 2019. On point refers to a technique where ballet dancers stand on the tip of their toes in specially designed shoes. Kim Seong, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. A thick blanket of yellow dust continues to cover the Korean peninsula with a dust advisory in effect in most parts of Korea and a warning for eastern regions. Now, air quality is forecast to improve as the day goes on, but southern regions and east of Gangwon-do should continue to see unbearable air quality all day today. Kids and the elderly must wear face masks. Also, wash hands frequently and drink plenty of water for your own safety. It's not a good idea to ventilate indoor air with windows open when it's this bad. Despite the dust, today is expected to be another fine, sunny, and warm spring day. Breezy morning temperatures turn into early summer warms in some parts, topping out a pleasant 25 degrees here in the capital, Busan at 22 degrees Celsius. Air quality returns to normal levels tomorrow. Then there is nationwide rain in the forecast this weekend, and that rain will bring a slight drop in temperatures. With that in mind, here's a look at the international weather conditions.
And those are the headlines at this hour here in Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session. Do stay with us. Thank you for now.